when the teen or the child is really, fighting back and being defiant and having those behaviors during meal times and really, pushing the boundaries and pushing the structure to be able to say, this is like not my kid. This is the eating disorder. This, my kid would never do this. Kind of like saying those things to themselves really does help them kind of hold the line with the eating disorder.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Into Place Therapy podcast. I'm your host, Isabel Ball. Today, I'm joined by Christin Conkle, LMFT, who's the program manager for the Adolescent Eating Disorder programs at University of California, San Diego, and Dr. Karam Jones, clinical psychologist and supervisor at UCSD's Eating Disorders Center for Treatment and Research. We're going to talk today about family-based treatment, or FBT, how caregivers are involved, how their role changes over time, and what helps families feel more confident and supported throughout the recovery process. So let's get into it. Christin and Anna, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So for listeners who may not be familiar, can you two explain what family-based treatment is? And we refer to it generally as FBT. And how does it involve families in the recovery process?
Yeah. So FBT, family-based therapy, it's often a good tool as far as like providing some guidance, support, really to empower caretakers to refeed their children when they have an eating disorder, especially when they are have anorexia nervosa or underweight. And this is a good tool for other disorders as well with the refeeding process. So FBT often takes the strength of the caretakers and really emphasizes that they know their kid, that they know what is best for them. And then it takes the professional clinician's education and really helps merge these two together. The clinician being the lead as far as like the recovery process and what we know works clinically. And then the parents really taking FBT and how it empowers parents and caretakers to know their child and get them, if they have changed, really get them back to their children the way they knew them before. They oftentimes really, the goal is really empowering them too. They can often have a sense of loss of empowerment through this process. So when kids get sick, they often just parents and caretakers don't know really what to do. And so, which makes sense because it can be a very scary time. They often feel really helpless and scared. So tasking them with goals and structure, some behavior interventions, and some mealtime expectations can really help empower them to take the step with the refeeding process.
And what would you say surprises families most when they start out with FBT?
I would say that the biggest thing that happens is oftentimes their reluctancy with knowing how much to feed them, what that looks like, the portion sizing. It can be really daunting because they often it is so scary that they haven't known really what to feed them. They've just been doing whatever they can to get their kids to eat anything. And so when we're teaching about balanced foods and nutrition and calories and portion sizing, the portion sizing can be a little, daunting. It can feel like a lot. And so really showing them through the weight charts, which is part of FBT, is every session showing the weight charts and showing the data that, yes, this feels like a lot of food. And maybe your kid is only gained like half a pound, or maybe they haven't gained anything. And because of the body and the medical complications that come with the eating disorder. So I think parents can often feel a little shocked with the amount of nutrition that, their children do need when they have been sick with the eating disorder.
Yeah. I feel like it's a good question, like thinking about kind of what elements of treatment surprise parents most. I also think sometimes this concept of like things get worse before it gets better can be really surprising and confusing for parents. I think there's this concept of like, if my kid is struggling and they get treatment, then like therapy's supposed to feel good and they're supposed to get better right away. And I think with eating disorder treatment and family-based treatment in particular, it's often this kind of like upside down approach of therapy where, we're asking teens to do what they need to do and for parents to kind of be really involved. And I think sometimes the behaviors of the eating disorder can get really loud and can get worse before it gets better. And that can feel really like counterintuitive, I think, to parents who are sometimes they're like, isn't therapy supposed to make my kid better right away? Or isn't therapy supposed to feel good? And a lot of times, like having parents refeeding their child, the eating disorder doesn't like that. So it doesn't often feel good right away. I think that can be really hard and surprising for parents.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that is in some ways one benefit of FBT is it does give, there's no timeline, of course, for any of this, but it gives some sense of structure where we're headed, and then making that point clear too of like, we can't just, it's not linear. I think is so important for families to hear when they feel so uncertain about what's going to happen. So you both, of course, have a lot of experience working with families across different levels of care.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And just for background, with our program, we are a higher level of care program, with the highest level of care being a partial hospitalization 10-hour. And then you have two different PHP levels. So there's a 10-hour level and then a 6-hour level, and then an intensive outpatient IOP, which is about 3 hours. So we do have like a few different levels of care in our program. And I feel like whenever teens start in our program and are at the highest level of care, there's a significant amount of support from the treatment program and the teen, like for the teen and the parent. So teens are in program for many hours a day. The parents are required to come in for several groups, several meals. And there really is just like structurally a lot of support. And it's a 6-day-a-week program. So the teens are there most of the day, most days of the week for most of the day in terms of hours of the day. And during this process, parents are getting a lot of education. They're getting different groups, both like more process-oriented groups and support from other parents, as well as more didactic-based groups on strategies to help their kid, coping skills, things like that. And then they're also having some meals with their teen. And in that process, they're learning some skills around, empower, kind of like Christin was saying, empowering parents that they know how to feed their kid. And sometimes the eating disorder can leave parents feeling really like unsure and lacking confidence in that process. So one of our goals is for parents or for staff to really empower parents that they do know how to feed their kid. And sometimes things look a little different when you're in treatment for an eating disorder. So maybe they need more nutrition right now than they needed before. So trying to help them like regain their confidence with parenting and with refeeding their child. So I would say structurally the program, like in early stages of treatment and higher levels of care in our program, we just try to kind of pour a lot of support and structure. And as teens step down in the program, we kind of will say to parents sometimes that, a step down level of care is a step up for parents. Parents are required to do more outside of program, hopefully with the skills they've learned when they've been in higher level of care. So hopefully, the intention there is that by being like stepping down, they're ready for the next stage, and the challenges that will involve. So as they step down in levels of care, parents are asked to take on more in terms of providing the structure around meals, the coaching around meals, preparing the food, supervising before, during, after. So they really do take on more as they get to lower levels of care. And then hopefully along that process, their child is also getting better in recovery. The kid's learning more coping skills and more strategies and has more tools in their toolkit to be able to navigate the distress that comes with. But yeah, I would say common strategies such as like getting support with meal coaching, both parents and teens learning coping skills, learning how to kind of like plate their kid for what their kid needs in the eating disorder, empowering parents are some of the common strategies, as well as the support from other parents who are also in the program, and just the validation of how difficult and hard the process can be. And then, of course, like the treatment team and getting guidance from experts in eating disorders to really help build their confidence and help them navigate strategies to help their kid get better.
Yeah, and that's such a great point too of like, the community piece around it is so important for normalizing that it's not a linear process, and that you're not supposed to know everything before you go through the process. And so I think that can really help with developing that sense of competence of, first and foremost, getting rid of the shame aspect, or trying to address the shame aspect. And so,
Absolutely.
I mean, Anna, you just shared that there are different strategies that you all use in the treatment process to help parents feel a bit more competent in their roles. And at the beginning stages of treatment, I hear from a lot of families that they feel like they're doing it wrong, or they're scared of doing it wrong. So can you both just talk a little bit more about like what are some things that help parents feel more confident?
Yeah. I think that oftentimes when it's true, I mean, parents come in and just understandably are just at such a loss, and just are sometimes being asked to do things very different and maybe outside their parenting style. They may have parented one way, and through the eating disorder, we're asking them to do something really different. And especially if they have other kids, and we're saying, okay, this is kind of how you parented. Now maybe you need to be more firm. Maybe you need to hold the line. Maybe, you need to hold the boundaries, but their parenting style that's not natural for them. And so that learning about their parenting style, learning about parent like management training, learning about, not that they need to learn how to be a parent, but just to do it differently, and that their kid with the eating disorder might need something a little bit different. And so, yeah, helping them like build confidence through the refeeding process. And it is very slow moving, as fast as, that they often want to, see the mental recovery happen much quicker, and getting them to see that focusing on the physical recovery, they do start to see glimmers more of their kids with the refeeding process. And as you mentioned, it is a slow process oftentimes. But as they start to see the refeeding happen, they start to provide the right nutrition. They do start to feel more and more confident. Like, okay, that I can do this. When they also see that, if their teen had a really big reaction, or was very, reactive to maybe a boundary or something that was placed, and they get through that, that helps them build confidence too, of like, okay, I can do this. Like, I can sit with my kid, I can sit with this discomfort. And, we often use a lot of DBT strategies here too that we integrate into our treatment. And so we teach a lot of different coping strategies as well to help with the discomfort of that. And each time they battle one thing and overcome it, they seem to gain more and more confidence.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you're talking about like there's different parenting styles, and we're not like demonizing any of them. It's more, how do we adjust, the kind of parent that you want to be, or that comes naturally to you, but strengthen it in a sense.
Yeah, and we don't get taught what kind of parent we're going to be, like we don't know. Nobody teaches us that. And so, to have these parents, caretakers here, and first identifying what kind of, parent they are, and then recognizing, oh, I may need to do this differently. And you have kids that are, in adolescence, starting off perhaps, or like older childhood. That's hard because you've been doing something the same way for a very long time. So it takes some time.
Yeah. And I feel like the nice thing about FBT is there is like this emphasis on learning. So I think too, I kind of try to remind parents that like we can always try something and we'll see how it goes. And if it's effective, then great. And if it's not, like there's probably going to be another time to practice doing something differently. And even like reflecting on things that they did or they tried. Like, oh, okay, like your teen had a really tough time with a meal, and you decided that in that moment, they had plans with their friends later in the night, and you decided that, for them to go off with their friends, they really need to complete their nutrition. Like, how did that go? Did it work? Was it effective? I think sometimes parents will try things out and then it will go really well and they decide they want to keep doing it. And so the nice thing about FBT is I think it helps parents like reflect on what's working in the process and what isn't working as well. So there's never like, you can always try something different in the future, even if it doesn't go well. Because that happens too, where parents will try something and they feel like it didn't go well, or their kid end up like restricting significantly. And I think there's spaces to like reflect on what strategies they use and if there's something they want to try differently in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, because, obviously a big critique of FBT sometimes is that it is so rigid. But hearing you two speak, I mean, it's obvious you have so much experience because you are leaving room for the flexibility and the reality that, this isn't going to work manual type style for every family. And so, recognizing that all families are different, whether like from a cultural perspective or resources that they have perspective, how do you all adapt to FBT to support families of all kinds?
Yeah, I think that FBT is actually really well suited for adapting based on different types of families, whether that's different, cultures of families, different resource levels. I think like thinking about the manual, as you mentioned, it really kind of highlights that FBT hopes that parents and families are able to figure out for themselves how to get their child better with the support and guidance of an expert. So I think that just inherently there leaves a lot of room for what does this look like for your family and how can you make this work given what's important for your family. One example I think that comes to mind is somebody I'm working with right now. Actually, in our program, we have different programmatic rules and expectations. So our meals are 30 minutes long. And parents were working on kind of expectations for their teen at home and kind of coming up with some contingencies around that and noticing that their teen really struggles with slow pacing and that being a mealtime behavior that they have. And so and also delaying eating. So, okay, it's time for you to come to the table to eat. And then the teen will say, oh, hold on, I have this XYZ to do. And we'll really try to push back and delay meals. And then on top of the slow pacing, meals end up taking a long time. And there's a lot of struggles around those. And so the parent recognized, in program, y'all have 30-minute meals. And for our family, before the eating disorder, it's really more normal for us to have like longer dinners. 30 minutes feels quite fast for our family. What would be more normative would be 45 minutes, 50 minutes for a dinner. And so, in that conversation, I absolutely encourage parents to set the expectation of what's normal for their family. So rather than just kind of blindly following the expectations of meal times and meal limits that we do in program, encouraging them to, set an expectation that makes sense for like what their family norm is. So mom kind of decided like, okay, like let's set the expectation that at home she needs to complete dinner within a 50-minute period. So that really kind of allows that flexibility of what's normal for their family and their culture to kind of show up in the room and not just be based on like what the manual says or the way things are done in program. So that's just one example, but I think that comes up. There's many others I could think of. I also think with the access to resources, I think this is really relevant because I think it does come up quite a bit, even with like access to care and people with private insurance versus public and what insurance programs are contracted with. So I do think that is a big challenge because I think FBT, eating disorder treatment being a specialized treatment, there can be differences in just what access people have both to treatment and to what it looks like for parents being able and having the capacity to do FBT. I mean, I think FBT really does require a lot of parents in terms of providing that mealtime structure, preparing foods, plating foods, supervising meals and snacks. And if you have if both parents are working 2 jobs to make ends meet, that can make it really challenging to do FBT in its, manualized format. So I think that definitely poses a challenge. And I think in our program, we try to meet parents where they're at with regard to these type of topics. So I think that can look really different depending on the family and what they're showing up with. But I think it's like, okay, even if the goal is this, or if this is like best case scenario that a parent's supervising every meal and snack, I think problem solving comes up of like, okay, well, is there an aunt who can come over for dinner, or is there a grandma who is present who can step in? Like figuring out kind of what other resources and supports the family has, even if it doesn't look like it looks in the manual.
Yeah, and that's such a great point too, because I think what you're talking about in there too is like parent capacity or caregiver capacity. And I'm just curious, and for either of you to respond, like burnout and caregiver burnout, what are your thoughts on that, or how do you support families who are experiencing that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think because the recovery process can be so lengthy with burnout, and relapses are common. Eating disorders also can change. So it really can play a role and take a toll really on caretakers. I think specifically our program can be helpful in a sense because we do have our PHP, our partial hospitalization that starts at 10 hours. And so it does give some families a little bit of respite, whether they've been doing it 100% on their own or they've been kind of in and out or trying different levels of care. Essentially, it can really alleviate because during that time they have all of their meals essentially with us during the week. So giving them a little bit of time to take care of themselves and to do some things to recoup and to plan, because that's part of it too. Again, some families maybe have a difficult time with working and other children and other family members and just other life stuff happening, that it can really be difficult, and especially as how long that they've been in it. If they've been in it for a few years or so, they can really be just sometimes even like feeling like, I just want this done. I just want this to be fixed and I just want this to be done. And really trying to figure out how we can more support them. And I think like Anna had said, it's like tapping into these other family members or tapping into different strategies, and to get like families more involved. We also do offer different parent groups where they also can learn their own skills, hopefully as well, in coping strategies too through this process, because again, not everyone learns those. And so really kind of having them learn those and practice those can also be really helpful to them with burnout.
And, first of all, I want to say that I've worked with clients and families who have gone through UCSD and have had really wonderful experiences. And so, you're just naming all the different parts of your program, and it really is holistic. And so I want to give a shout out to both of you in the program.
Thank you. It's always good to hear that. I would say too, I think Christin, who's led our Saturday programming for over 10 years, knows this best. I do think there's just so much power in the support that parents get from other parents in those like in-person process groups and support groups, that it's just really powerful, I think, for them to lean on each other and to hear from other parents who are also feeling exhausted and struggling, and to hear people, echo some of those similar sentiments, but then also to hear people who are maybe several weeks farther along and to say like, we had this breakthrough this week, and the first 5 weeks of treatment, we didn't see any weight gain, but now we're here and things are moving forward and it feels so good. So I think there just holds so much power in that like parent space where they're really, really able to support each other in a way that is maybe similar to, but also quite different from the support they get from the professionals on their treatment team.
Yeah, there's hope in that, or it can help with instilling hope in a sense. And also hearing people at different points helps us get more insight into like what is an eating disorder, get a better understanding of what is an eating disorder and how it works. And so with that, I know a principle or tenet of FBT is about externalizing the eating disorder. And in some ways, I think that can help with preventing burnout or navigating burnout. So
Yep,
I'd love if you two could talk some more about that.
Yeah, that is, a big tenet as far as like not only which is like confusion and like burnout. Yeah, I mean, I think eating disorders, they're very confusing. They're quite the specialty. And when we're tasking the parents, providing the education around what is, like you said, like what is the eating disorder, medically, what is going on, nutritionally, what is going on. And that can be just gaining a little bit more experience. I mean, even, at this, excuse me, at this day and age, there's still a lot of myths and things about eating disorders. So really kind of working through those. Um, and then really like identifying that to parents that who they see in front of them really is the eating disorder and not their child. And that can be really difficult to conceptualize. But noticing that the child that's, underweight and, fearful of weight and increased anxiety and scared, that their mood and affect and demeanor has changed. And that if the caretakers can see that, okay, yeah, this isn't like my kid. My kid, was never like this. My kid didn't do this. My kid never would say this to me. Really getting them to understand. I often use some examples of saying, this is like an abusive partner, or this is like somebody really bullying them. And, it's within them. But that, the parents, the caretakers, and sometimes the professionals are they're the eating disorder is telling them that they're the ones that are doing the harm, that they're the ones that are, making them eat or making them fat or making them feel a certain way. It's like this bully convincing them that they are going to be better if they listen to them. So listening to the eating disorder. And it's a really hard concept to do because parents are like, but this is my kid. And, this is like my kid saying this. And it really does, if parents are able to do that, then it does help them better when the teen or the child is really, fighting back and being defiant and having those behaviors during meal times and really, pushing the boundaries and pushing the structure to be able to say, this is like not my kid. This is the eating disorder. This, my kid would never do this. Kind of like saying those things to themselves really does help them kind of hold the line with the eating disorder. And oftentimes if I kind of say like this bully or this, then parents usually will kind of like, okay, yeah, like I'm not, I'm like, you guys aren't going to let your kid be bullied. You're not going to let your kid, be in this abusive relationship. And they're like, absolutely not. So the best way to do this is through nutrition at first. So getting the nutrition in, giving them more than you think they need, giving them different, varieties of food, or at least eating back to how they were before, whatever their cultural maybe family is eating. But getting them to be willing to do that, the other part of it is not all kids are internally motivated, right, to get better. And so a lot of times getting the parents to identify and work through like rewards or consequences to help them do the hard thing. And when you're doing the hard thing or the thing you're afraid of, sometimes you need external things to help you or to incentivize you. And so some parents, once they start like getting into that concept, which sometimes can be difficult, again, based on your parenting style, they often can start to see their, teen maybe adapting or doing what they are supposed to be doing. And then going back to the original question, that also helps to empower the parents because then they start to see like, oh, okay, yeah, my kid does like structure and consistency and does like I notice the anxiety going down with this when I provide what I need to for them, whether it's the food or the boundaries or the limit setting. And so then they start to say, oh, I'm starting to see my kid. Like I'm starting to now see my kid here and there and these glimmers of their kid back. And I think once they start to see that, they go, oh, so that was the eating disorder. Oh yeah, that look that you're getting, those dark eyes, and or that kid of yours saying those things to you that they would never say, and then they'd be able to identify it because yeah, sometimes they have been with the eating disorder for so long, it's hard for them to distinguish that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. That also part of an eating disorder is it does sort of cause disconnection, and then it becomes unclear when is my child there and when aren't they, and then it makes connection with them difficult. And I'm curious, obviously boundaries and structures is a big part of FBT, like you two explained. And so how can we help families stay connected to the child while also maintaining those boundaries and structure?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. What comes to mind for me is, Kristen mentioned we do DBT here as well and implement those, like teaching both the parents and the teens those skills, and how, meal times can be tough, and we still want teens and families to have positive moments outside of those meal times. I think what can be hard is that treatment and doing FBT in the short term can definitely increase conflict in the home and tension among parents and their kids, especially at mealtime. And I think it's like trying to find other ways in which they can spend some positive time together. And kind of going back to DBT, I'm even thinking of, recently we covered the accumulate the positive skill, and the homework that we gave, because we have a multifamily DBT group, and the homework we gave to the teens and their parents is to do one pleasant activity together over the course of the week. So I think that kind of like built into the program structure, we are kind of encouraging that it isn't just a focus on, the meals and the snacks. Obviously, that's our top target, is getting, making progress with eating disorder treatment and recovery. And what do things look like outside of it? This also came up with a family I'm working with right now where, the meal times and even outside of the meal times are really, really hard. And finding that it tends to be really pleasant we're in San Diego, so we have an ocean nearby, like going to the ocean and just like sitting and like looking at the ocean and like watching people kind of walk by was like really positive experiences. And helped both, I think, the parent and the kid kind of reconnect to those positive moments when there's been so many moments that have been filled with like dysregulation, a lot of kind of negative statements from the teen to the parent that were causing a lot of burnout, even with trying to kind of externalize the eating disorder. So I think it is about kind of encouraging parents to, what does it look like to build some moments of positivity, or even doing something neutral. So even if it's not positive, like, can you watch a movie together after evening snack? What does that look like? And I also like to educate parents that even if like the tension in the relationship during treatment, like even if that conflict and tension increases during FBT, it usually isn't long lasting. And actually, a lot of times the teen can recognize that what their parents are doing with FBT is helping them and needed for them to get better. And actually, I've had many teens say that they're really grateful for their parents holding the line and helping them recover. They don't always say that in front of the parents. Sometimes we hear that in the teens process group or, behind closed doors. And, I think that that's like an important aspect of it too, that even if meal times are hard, even if the conflict is there, that we don't see it as a permanent damage to the relationship. And often it improves the relationship in the long term as their kid is better and functioning better and feeling better.
Yeah, and I know as therapists we talk a lot about the nervous system and kind of like reactivity in the short term, and so it is hard to look at that bigger picture for both the child and of course families. But I love that idea of the ocean jealous. The ocean definitely probably helps with that, but it does sort of soothe us and put us all in a state of a relaxed nervous system where we can connect in a lot of ways. So, we've been talking about, or you two have shared a lot about sort of the early stages and getting through some of that. And we use the term early, but we know, it can be at any point. So once things do start to stabilize, one thing I hear from parents is like a fear of stepping back or pulling back, of like what happens if I'm no longer as present or as involved. So what would you say is maybe the family's role in letting the child move through independently while still being a reliable safety net?
Yeah. So within FBT, there are 3 phases to it. And independence and autonomy is the end goal. So we do want them to have independence and developmentally appropriate autonomy. And so even though it feels like this intense like structure and consistency and just kind of boundary setting at the beginning, we also do want them to learn how to have that independence. As far as like what comes next, so the disorder, as we've kind of been talking, is just, it's not quick. It definitely is a lengthy process. Often we say it's the marathon, not, the quick run here. But as soon as the child is like weight restored or is in weight maintenance, depending on the disorder, and the behaviors have decreased, mood is improved, the brain is more nourished, then this is often kind of when we notice that caretakers, want to take their foot off the gas, if you will. Like they want to kind of go back to their normal life. They want to get the kids kind of back to school and, get back to sports and vacations and family planning. And, the disorder really it is up and down. And so I think once these goals have been met, it's just important to continue to have the support. Like either, you're still having a team in place, staying on track with meals and snacks. That might look a little bit differently. It doesn't necessarily mean you're on the rigid schedule as you were once before, but staying mindful of meals and snacks and keep that is still a priority. Keeping like the refuels and movement and exercise, and just keeping your eye on the physical recovery too at this point, even though you might be merging into more the mental recovery phase of it. I often can just see families perhaps like wanting to do that, getting back to their life kind of a little too quickly. And so just being able to take it slow and just know that it's going to take some time. And then within FBT, the third phase, it's common to have the teen, maybe through anxiety or school or friendships or things like that, where they might be a little bit more independent and have autonomy with meals and snacks. But they also just might be in a stressful time. And so it would be important then for maybe families to be willing to go back to phase 1 for a little bit. Be willing to say, hey, like you're stressed with your finals, or you're going through some friend stuff, or things are happening, I'm going to help you out, and I'm going to just prepare these meals and snacks for you for a little bit. And then you'll get it back. You'll get your autonomy back, but just for a few weeks, I'm going to step in and help. So it's a little bit of a dance with that. I don't think it's necessarily like all or nothing, like, oh, you have all your autonomy and I'm out. Like, I don't have to be involved anymore. And so kind of having some radical acceptance a little bit about that they're going to need you to be in it and be willing to step in when things do get like stressful or anxiety gets high. And then giving it back. And so just a little bit of, acknowledgement that is probably going to be the case. I mean, even until early adulthood, I mean, I know that's like kind of can be hard to hear, but as we have definitely worked with adolescents and families, and then stayed in contact with them in early adulthood, or even like when they get of finding wanting to get married and just wanting to have a partner, and just like looking for the stresses of like the wedding dress and all of those things. And it's like they hadn't maybe thought about the eating disorder in years, but then there's a body image component with that, and like the way they want to look, and they're they're so lucky that they have people supports around them that might be like, I'm going to keep my eye on this. Like, we're dress shopping. I need to keep my eye, and like, how are foods going and how are things happening? And that is kind of part of the process with recovery.
I really liked how you explained that, because I think sometimes when families hear like this is a long process, they're like, oh my gosh, it's going to be like it is right now. That's what you're telling me for a long time. But, I think what you're saying is important, because obviously a big part of eating disorder treatment is working on flexibility. And that's true of the family too, that dance that you're describing. That's super important. And I think can be helpful for families to be like, yes, this is a long process, but it's more going to ebb and flow with life stressors.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too. I think some parents kind of that evolution of what's hard at different stages. Like, I think some parents, when they start FBT, they're like, what do you mean I have to plate every meal and every snack? Like that, I haven't done that for my kids since they were 7 years old. But then sometimes that can become a comfort zone of being able to, like, they kind of get that skill and they're like, okay, this works. I know how to do this. And then it can be really scary to then let go and kind of like have the teen take on more of their own plating or deciding what snacks or meals they want and what does that look like. So I think there can be a lot of fear just throughout the process in general for parents with having a kid with an eating disorder. And we talk about the dance, and I think the dance can be really effective to kind of have that skill of, taking on more of the phase 1 goals versus letting go. And I think it can be hard to have that flexibility for parents, because I think sometimes parents can find comfort in either phase 1 or more of the phase 2, allowing kids to take on more. So, but recognizing that sometimes it might require doing the phase that's less of a comfort zone for a time as they navigate the recovery journey.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, of reminding families like, yes, that was your least favorite, but you've done it before, and you got through it. And so it's inherently going to be different from the first time. Doesn't mean easier necessarily, but you have the experience in that. So since we're nearing the end here, one thing I really wanted to ask you too, because like I said before, I think you all have amazing programming and do a really good job of making sure parents feel part of the treatment team. So I'm curious what you all feel helps to ensure or support families in feeling like they're part of the team, and what you wish other programs might do better, right, in that sense.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think because we are an FBT-based higher level of care treatment, we really kind of take that philosophy and run with it. So we even conceptualize parents as being part of the treatment team. I feel like we kind of involve them in all or most all decisions that we have. So, parents are involved in discussions around, step down. They're involved in discussions around how the teen's doing, what we want to target. They're involved in kind of, while we definitely come up with goal weight range recommendations and look at growth charts and provide our expertise, we ask parents what they think every step along the way, and kind of what are their goals, and what are we working on. So I think we really do embody this idea that parents are on the treatment team and we're working with them, and that they're the expert on their child. And ultimately, we want them to be able to kind of, like, they're with us for a time, but really it tends to be a short time in their recovery journey. So we're really just kind of working with them so that they gain the skills to be able to do this in the long term, not just the time that they're with us. So I feel like those are some initial thoughts on kind of how we really involve them. And then I think just in terms of like what I wish other programs would do more of is, in a simplistic answer, I wish there'd be more of FBT in other programs, and kind of having parents be involved and plate for their kid, and, coach their kid when their eating disorder is really loud, and have parents have that support while they're like in the trenches and having the emotional outbursts and struggles, and giving them support in the moment of how to navigate, how to get through it. would be things that I would love to see more programs doing. Curious your thoughts, Kristen.
Yeah, I was like thinking similarly as far as the involvement and kind of like what we hear from families. And I do think that at first the program can feel a little daunting because of the demand of the parent involvement. I think sometimes that can feel like a con because we have initially like a 6 day a week program, and we have parents here Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then all day on Saturdays for 6 hours, doing meals and meal coaching and learning how to do these strategies, and then having parents process groups. So it definitely can feel life interfering. And I will say at the end of it, then we get back, and that's the most like compliments we get is how involved they were, and how much they appreciated, and how they also wish that maybe there were other programs that kept them either more in the loop more or felt like they were part of the treatment team. We do spend quite a lot of time with them and build a really good relationship. I feel like just with all of us running parent groups and having families, and seeing them in the hallway and being able to connect on the hallway and just like have casual conversations, building these connections. There is a safety with that, and a feeling comfortable and trust us, because we are asking them to do a really hard thing as far as, leaving their kid here, learning to do things they're not used to doing. And so I think that, not being afraid of asking parents to do that, because they will do it. Caretakers will do it, and they will show up in that way, and they do want to learn. I think we've talked about that there's just different ways to go about that based on their parenting or their learning style or their history. But yeah, I really think that parents will and caretakers will show up for their teen if you ask that of them.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think that's true, and I've seen that in my own work. And if they feel invited and welcome,
Mhm.
yeah, they're game. So most
Yeah.
of the time.
Yeah, they will try. They will do it. Yeah.
Yeah, in a parent process group, a parent recently said that, like, I thought just this wording I thought was really powerful, that like as a parent they have like an endless well of like showing up and supporting their kid for whatever they need to do to get them better. And I was like, yeah, I see that all the time where parents like they like move mountains to be here. Literally, sometimes parents will kind of uproot their whole life from a different geographical location in order to come to San Diego for treatment. And then they move mountains with their work schedules to be able to accommodate showing up to every family session, every parent group. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, that I think parents will often like throw themselves in and do whatever they need to do. And I think sometimes it does take kind of having to do it because the program asks them to or is a requirement. And I think whenever they do, they really like get a lot out of that journey.
Yeah, well, I mean, this has been really helpful, I think, and it will be for a lot of parents. I know, we talk about like advocating for yourselves and for your family and for your kids, but that's hard to do if we don't know what treatment looks like, and all of a sudden we're in it. And so I really appreciate you two being willing to give people sort of an inside look at what that looks like at UCSD and what that can look like FBT wise. I think that's going to mean a lot to a lot of people. So thank you both.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we appreciate you inviting us and having us.
All right. And to everyone listening, thanks for being here. And we'll see you next time on the Into Place Therapy podcast.